Annyeonghaseyo. I'm Matthew McLean. I'm the creative director of Frieze Studios and the editor of Frieze Week magazine. Welcome to Seoul. This is Art Live, where I will be reporting from the opening day of the third Frieze Seoul. On the cover of Frieze Week this year, it's an extract from a comic by the Korean graphic novelist Yongshin Ma. And you see there's this really striking wedge-shaped building, and I'm pretty sure Ma has based that on this one, which is SongEun, the headquarters of an art and cultural foundation. It's designed by the Swiss architects Herzog and de Meuron, which is their first project ever in Korea. Especially timed to open during Frieze Week Seoul, the exhibition at SongEun is Portrait of a Collection, a selection of works from the prestigious Pinault Collection, founded by the French businessman François Pinault. And it's been really beautifully curated by the collection's senior curator, Caroline Bourgeois. The exhibition is concise, but it contains some really incredible moments of encounter with different artists, including in it. There's a room beautifully curated of just works by the American artist David Hammonds. There's a wonderful pairing of paintings by the artist Peter Doig and the Swiss painter Miriam Kahn. There's also a brilliant installation featuring an animatronic talking mouse, which is a very playful nod to a similar work by the British artist Ryan Gander, which is installed permanently at the Pinault Collection's Bourse du Commerce in Paris. It's not the first time that SongEun has worked with a global institution. In the past, they've done collaborations with the likes of the Delphina Foundation, based in London. But I think the presence of such esteemed artists and iconic works in this exhibition is really tribute to Seoul's growing status as a global art centre. So I've arrived at Frieze Seoul. Coming through the south entrance, I'm immediately greeted by this really bold installation, commissioned by the Frieze Artist Award winner Goen Choi. There's a really nice energy in the aisles, with collectors and curators from Korea, from the wider Asia region, and from further afield, all visiting here today. There are about 100 museum groups all officially attending the fair this year, and they might bump into people from popular culture too, like the DJ Paik, who I've just seen walking the aisles. I know that later on today, the entire K-pop boy band 17 are attending. Let's go and see who we can see, and more importantly, the art they're looking at. This is the stand of Hakgojae Gallery, which was founded here in Seoul, and behind me is a really epic, eye-catching work by the Korean master Namjoon Paik. Paik is one of the godfathers of Korean art, and was arguably the first artist to really act as an ambassador between the Korean art scene and that of the rest of the world. From the mid-60s, when Paik began working with commercially available VHS equipment, he became really one of the pioneers of video and broadcast art. This work is from the late period of Paik's career. It's made in the early 90s. And it's a moment when I think actually Paik was seeing the kind of media landscape that he prophesied actually coming to life all around him. There are many references to clocks in the pieces, both physical clocks, footage of clocks, and the whole form of the sculpture sort of resembles the face of a clock as well. And I think it somehow is a reflection on the passing of time and the sort of sense of completion towards the end of a life's work. It's particularly touching to see this work here because I found out just last night, a Korean curator told me that Paik's remains are in fact interred at the Bongunsa Temple, which is just across from COEX here. So the artist's remains and his legacy in really close proximity.
About a year ago, I was contacted by the Arts and Culture Development Foundation of Uzbekistan to see if I would be interested in curating the first edition of the Bukhara Biennial, which is a new biennial that's launching in Uzbekistan. When we thought about where we would announce this project, I really wanted to inscribe this as an Asian biennial, but also there's a large Korean diaspora in Central Asia. And I thought there couldn't be a better place to launch this project than here 1 year in advance in Seoul with you guys. It's also interesting to see all of these attempts to communicate across the Asias. This idea that you don't always have to look to Western art models to build institutions. So it's an interesting moment.
I know you've only just got here, so you probably hadn't a chance to see much of the fair at all, but is there anything that's immediately caught your eye or works that speak to you?
Oh, absolutely. There's a Nora Turato work around the corner that's speaking about the importance of sleep.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how sleep deprived are you right now?
10.
All right, I hope you get some rest.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you.
So alongside leading galleries from the US, from Europe, from Latin America, around 60% of the exhibitors at Frieze Seoul operate here in Asia. This conversation between contemporary art in Asia and the rest of the world, I think, is really exemplified by this wonderful architect design stand behind me. which is showing the works of the Japanese artist Takuro Kuwataa and the American artist Dan McCarthy. I've been passionate about Takuro Kuwata's work for a long time. There's something about his language which is just so sensuous and delicious, and yet so strange and perplexing at the same time. I'm completely obsessed. But what's really interesting seeing his work in dialogue with Dan McCarthy is to see how their traditions shape their practice. So Dan was a painter for a number of years and has sort of returned to ceramics. And I think you can see how his work in watercolor has sort of influenced the very soft but quite spontaneous color that you find in his ceramics. Whereas in Takuro's case, he studied a lot of traditional Japanese ceramic techniques, including very specific glazes, which lead to the extraordinary kind of textures and surfaces you see in his work. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning.
How are you doing today?
Doing well. Doing well.
Talk about this extraordinary presentation you brought to the fair. This very distinctive vocabulary you have of the works inside the stand here, of working with glass and with transparency and repetition and reflection.
Yeah, actually it started with the Philippine language. Because with the Filipino language, because it's the writing is syllabic, there's a lot of flipping, like or a shared ambigrams and palindromes. So, like when you say the earth, it's lupa. You say the clouds, it's ulap. They share the same letters, but they're opposites. And there are a lot of other words that are similar that relate to the earth and the sky. You know, so it started there, and it kind of is a nice to talk about the material and the non-material too, because the mirror space is something that's flat. It's two-dimensional, and yet you see three-dimensional images on the mirror. If you put two mirrors beside or in front of each other, you get a tunnel of infinity. Now they're visual palindromes.
What do you hope people visiting, encountering these works maybe for the first time at the fair will experience or feel, or what do you hope they're going to take away from seeing your work today?
That our senses are limited, and that what we see is just a very, very small part of the light spectrum. You know, there's other kinds of light that we cannot see, and the color spectrum is just very, very small. So when you're looking at an image, about 90% of the image is not really there. It's just the play of light, and you know that it's an illusion, and yet it's so real. And for people to think that maybe not just in the artwork, but in reality, that's how we operate. You know, I see you, but you're not really that solid. We're all just, you know, vibrations and all that.
The neugerriemschneider stand is a group show all themed around depictions of the moon, including this suspended orb by Olafur Eliasson. This feels very appropriate to happen in Frieze Seoul because the moon is very important in Korean culture. The festival of Chuseok, which is coming up in a few days, is always celebrated on the harvest full moon. This is a really beautifully calm and meditative space, and it's a nice respite from the rest of the fair. Good morning, Herr Ropac. Can you tell me about Lee Kang-so, Korean artist who's just joined the roster, or you're announcing has joined the gallery, I think, this week, maybe?
Today.
Today. Congratulations.
Very excited. You know, Lee Kang-so is like a master. You know, he's one of the artists I always had admired. And he is also not an artist who is a painter or a sculptor. He was part of this movement in the 60s, and he was a founding member of a kind of Korean avant-garde, which was doing exactly the opposite of what traditional painting was doing, or even what painting was doing in a kind of very new sense. So I think he introduced not only his work, but became a strong pioneering voice, seeing that Korea had really its own schools, its own movements. And so this is impressive to have artists here who kind of really did their own thing. And I think he was a really strong part of this.
It was interesting to me just to read about, say, his performance at the Paris Biennial with the live chicken, and it made me think about Boyce says I like America and America likes me, and so I wanted to ask about, obviously, Boyce having been a major inspiration for you and now working with the estate. Can you tell me, do you feel that the radicalism of these positions, artists like Boyce and Lee Kang-so, is still possible in the art world of today?
I absolutely think so, because I think the art world has developed on a very open-minded, thought-provoking sense. It went from a very exclusive, environment to a very inclusive. It really opened up. I think the art world today is more open and more thought-provoking, going into every layer of human condition or social life than it ever was before. So it only can be as radical or more than any time before.
And finally, what is one thing that you would recommend any first-time visitor to Seoul absolutely prioritizes during their trip?
I think Seoul is a place where you have such a large landscape of museums. I think there's hardly another place, also in Asia, not even in Europe, where you have in one city so many different spaces dedicated to contemporary art. But to go to some of these really very exciting museums is a must. You have to go to the Leo, you have to go to the Amore Pacific, but then you have to go to also places for great architecture, like Space K Museum, and they're always doing exhibitions really on the most sophisticated level. And this is extraordinary about Seoul, that you have here a curatorial level which outshines the rest of Asia, and I think is extraordinary.
Seoul has so many important art institutions with really interesting exhibitions opening during Frieze Week. I'm actually quite exhausted at the thought of trying to get to even a fraction of them on my visit. But one show which I will definitely try to see, and which everybody in town is very excited about this week, is at the Liam Museum, and it's a solo exhibition by the artist Anicka Yi, whose work is behind me. This piece is called Radial Sensation. It was made last year by the artist, who was born in Seoul and is now based in New York. And I describe it at first glance as sort of a cross between a Baroque chandelier and an octopus. As you can see, it's made of fiberglass and metal, and it's animatronic. So there are these kind of tentacle-like flourishes that move slowly, almost like a jellyfish moving underwater. There are many artists at the moment who are very interested in forms of non-human life and non-human existence and consciousness. And I think what's really distinctive about Anicka's work is the way that she combines both an interest in the non-human in the form of the animal or biological world and that of the machine, the technological world. This is a fully non-human organism, but which is equal parts machine and animal. 안녕하세요.
안녕하세요. 반갑습니다.
Can you tell me, have you visited Frieze before? What are your first impressions?
실은 처음은 아니고 매년 작년부터 계속 오고 있는데 처음 왔을 때도 굉장히 놀랐거든요. 근데 이제는 솔직히 말하면 처음 왔을 때는 그냥 놀랐는데 작년에 제가 아트바젤도 갔다 왔지만 이제는 우리나라라서 그런 게 아니라 아트바젤보다 더 풍성하고 화려하고 볼거리가 많은 것 같아요. 그래서 너무너무 만족스럽고 대단히 감동적입니다.
What else are you doing this week in Seoul for Frieze Week? What are some of the highlights of your week?
제 계획은 오늘은 좀 편하게 봤지만 이렇게 편하게 보는 것도 좋은데 이제 내일 오늘 오후도 그렇고 그 다음 날도 굉장히 많은 사람들이 올 거예요. 한국 사람들은 정말 아트를 좋아하기 때문에. 근데 지금처럼 제 주관대로도 오늘 봤지만 많은 사람들은 어떻게 보는지 그걸 관찰하러 두 번 더 올 것 같아요. 저는 정말 제가 한국 사람에서 그런 게 아니라 이배 작가님 작품이 원래도 좋아했지만 점점 더 멋져지는 것 같고 너무너무 인상 깊었어요.
Lee Bei. We love Lee Bei, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Noémie Goudal is a French artist. She's actually nominated this year for the Prix du Champ, a very prestigious prize. So it's super exciting to see a new work by her premiere here at the fair, here in the lounge of Breguet, one of the fair's partners. Goudal's work also forms part of the Deutsche Bank collection, which is one of the largest collections of its kind in the world, with about 55,000 pieces. And at their new headquarters, opening just this week in London, you'll see a very important triptych by Noémie Goudal in the reception area. Goudal works in photography, but also in moving image, and she creates these extraordinary, bewitching, intricately made films like the one behind me. People often think that they're digitally rendered, but actually everything is filmed with physical props in a very complex, technologically advanced setup. And then physically, the items that she makes are manipulated, so they seem to be moving and changing in time. One of the innovations at the fair this year is the launch of Frieze Live, a program of live performances happening here on site and around the city, created by Jae-yoon. As we've seen, looking at the works by masters like So and Paik, there's a really rich lineage in Korean art history of performance art and live art. And so this program is a way of honoring that history, as well as seeing where performance art in Korea is today. The work going on right now is by the Korean artist Sumi Yang. It involves multiple performers who have been moving through the fair. They have Bluetooth speakers on their arms, playing music. They've been chanting, talking to each other in English and Korean. It's a mismatch of different phrases which engages the passers-by, but it's also kind of surreal and suggests they're in their own universe. The performer behind me keeps on claiming, "I want to remember you elegantly." I think I'll definitely remember this performance for some time. The performance has migrated back into the Frieze Live space, and it looks like it's turned into a bit of a dance party, so I'm going to go and join in. Thank you so much for joining us for Art Live, and I'll see you next time.